Hello, everybody, and welcome to your Rouxbe live event today. My name is Eric Wynkoop, and I'm the Director of Culinary Instruction here at Rouxbe, and I'm also one of your chef instructors amongst our team of about 5 members right now. And today in particular, I want to welcome you to my office hours, and this is your chance to ask food and cooking related questions, and I'll do my best to share my experience and respond to those questions. Okay. And as I take a look at today's list, I see that there are a number of questions that are already populated here. So I'll start out with the usual couple of housekeeping points. And the first one is on the right-hand side of the page of your screen, you'll see the list of questions. And if you would like to participate more directly, you're welcome to do so by entering a question or a comment in the dialog box up in the upper right-hand corner or so of your screen. And then also, as you look at the individual questions, you should see a heart-shaped icon. And if you would like that particular question answered sooner than later, please click on that heart-shaped icon and it'll push it up in priority. All right. Now, without further ado, let's go ahead and jump into today's list of questions. Thank you. And the first one is from Larry, who says, hello, chef. Hello, Larry. I pressure cook my own dry beans, wondering if you have best practices for creating and storing aquafaba from dried garbanzo beans. Yes. Let's see. So pressure cooking, yeah, is a great way to handle beans. And likewise, if you want to generate some aquafaba or bean water, which is basically the residual water from cooking beans, and fundamentally any beans, although garbanzo beans are pretty common because they're neutral in color and flavor and aroma, and otherwise pretty popular already in the space of these plant-based meringue, egg white-based meringue substitutes. And I think maybe the one thing that I'll mention here, Larry, is that when you produce aquafaba on your own, and if you go to whip it up, and it's too thin, it just doesn't whip up as you'd like, or equivalent to egg whites, you can reduce that water over some moderate heat and concentrate all of those carbohydrates and proteins and things that contribute to that foamy effect. And so in other words, you can adjust the consistency of the water to finally achieve a more stable aquafaba. Something you can't do, of course, with egg whites, but not that you need to do that with egg whites, right? So please give that a try. And and then further experiment, as you need to or want to, in terms of the initial cooking phase, okay, of the beans or the chickpeas in this case, in terms of water to bean ratio, so you can get closer to your desired concentration of aquafaba or bean water in the end from that first round of cooking. Okay, but really the takeaway here is that bean water is controllable. It's adjustable in consistency, and so please give that a try. Thank you. Okay, and next question here says, I'm new to tofu, tempeh, and seitan. What's the best way to start? Which one? Best way to prepare them? Okay. So tempeh, tofu, and seitan are, common meat alternatives. These are, I'll call them the lower tech meat alternatives compared to some of these products that are on the market today. And I think the nice thing about using these three ingredients is that they are available still in a pretty whole form, or relatively close to a whole food form. Um, Tofu is seitan is probably the most processed. This is where you've got the gluten from the wheat that's been extracted, and you can do this on your own as well with flour. But for the conversation today, starting out with someone who is new to this, will direct you to a pre-made product such as a Bob's Red Mill Vital Wheat Gluten. And then next on the list is probably tofu in terms of the degree of processing based on whole beans. They're cooked, they're blended, and then there's a coagulant that's added to them, and then some separation of solids to liquids, and so a couple of steps removed from the whole bean. And then tempeh comes in different styles, but it basically is based upon the whole bean that is then fermented. Okay. So again, all popular and nice, generally wholesome, or wholesome alternatives to meat. So in terms of the best way to start, jump on in. Really, that is the best way to start. We're talking about cooking here, and so I want to keep it as sort of simple and practical as possible, and not get caught up in what I might call or what I might say is analysis paralysis, in just thinking too much about it. There are let's see, 3 recipes that have been loaded for you here to start out. And they touch upon each of these 3 categories. And these are just nice recipes to start out. They're flavorful. They're pretty easy to handle. Now, the underpinning to all of this is going to be that you learn cooking methods and techniques, right, for handling ingredients. And this is where the Rouxbe courses come in. And if you're enrolled in a Rouxbe course, you're going to be exposed to these principles that have always been at the core of Rouxbe's educational philosophy. And if you're not enrolled in a course, then please consider that, because you will no longer be recipe bound or recipe dependent, right? Once you learn cooking methods and the ancillary techniques or supporting techniques of the kitchen. Instead, you'll be in control of the recipes with a much deeper understanding of how to apply heat and control time and work with different ingredients. Okay. And so again, the best way to start out is to go ahead and just jump on in. Try these recipes and try them more than once, okay? And adjusting for salt and some of these basic taste characteristics to best suit your palate, excuse me, or the preferences of your audience. And in terms of the best way to prepare them, again, just to summarize, follow the recipe. I always recommend that a person follow the recipe first to basically understand it, and then to start to make these small changes to tailor it, to your preferences and to your kitchen environment in terms of equipment and other unique elements or idiosyncrasies, to your kitchen. Okay. And so that's the way to do it. And I hope you have fun with it. Certainly, if you have questions along the way, you are welcome to reach out. And the best place to reach out would be at support@rouxbe.com. So that's going to be the support alias. Okay. support@rouxbe.com. Thank you. All right. And the next question reads, I just cooked halibut with lemon dill beurre blanc. However, the fish fillet got so mushy and the sauce was not with the right consistency. Thank you. Okay, so Now, there's a description of dinner last night, perhaps. Um, so, a couple of things. We have seafood cookery, fish cookery in this case, and we have a classic butter sauce, okay, a beurre blanc, in this case, flavored with lemon and dill. All right. And so I'm going to start out by saying the same thing that I said a moment ago before I add some details. And that is we need to understand the principles, right? The methods and the techniques that go into handling the fish as well as creating a beurre blanc. Okay. And, note that both of these activities have some technical aspects to them, so they require some practice. The beurre blanc. I'll start with the beurre blanc. It's not an easy sauce. It can be a bit temperamental. It's temperature sensitive, a little bit delicate. Okay. But as you work with a beurre blanc, probably the most common issue starting out, with student chefs, student cooks, or novices in the professional kitchen, is that the sauce breaks. And in other words, there's separation of the fat and the liquid components, the water components. Okay, so in other words, what you want to do is create an emulsion, and an emulsion, okay, is a combination of fat and water that you want to stay together to create this thick and creamy consistency in whatever it is that you're making. And usually it's in our context, it's a butter sauce of some sort. A hollandaise is a classic one that we typically practice with in culinary school. And then we move on to the beurre blanc in terms of making these beautiful variations on this butter sauce for many different entrees. Okay, but the first step is to reduce your base acidic flavorful liquid, which is commonly vinegar, and also a combination of vinegar and white wine. And okay, it could be red as well if you're making a beurre rouge. Okay, so a white butter sauce versus a red butter sauce, which actually comes out kind of beautiful pink colored. But anyway, so you'll reduce that, considerably, not all sec, but probably by, more than a half, 2/3, 3/4 of the way or so to concentrate the flavors. And then you want to let that heat drop. It could be by turning off the heat or pulling the pan off of the burner as you add knobs, which are just chunks of cold butter, and then you swirl those in. Okay, and that's so there's a temperature range in there, not too hot, not too cold, to create this emulsion, and that's where the practice comes into play. Okay. And so, I want you to go back to the kitchen, back to the pan, and try this out. Okay, you're going to find that sweet spot in there where you can maintain the emulsion. Now, once the sauce is put together, all the butter is incorporated. You want to maintain that sauce over a gently warm pan. If it gets too cool, it'll congeal. It'll set up hard or start to set up hard. And it'll have a tendency to break as it's heated up again. On the other hand, if it's too hot during that holding phase, it'll break, and you'll see this. It'll lose its cream-like viscosity and become very thin and runny. Although the flavor tastes good, the appearance gets a little bit less than smooth as well. So give that a practice, again, multiple times to find that ideal range. Okay. And then in terms of the fish, recommend some oil in the pan. And let me, I guess, step back to an earlier step, and that is when you buy the fish, ideally it would be a fresh product. That's going to set you up for the best success, rather than a previously frozen product. You can certainly use a previously frozen product, but Just what happens under the freeze thaw cycle is that water crystals expand, cell membranes rupture, such that when the product is thawed again, it becomes a little more loose than it would be in its fresh state. And that contributes, in part to, or maybe in large part, to the mushiness that you experienced. Okay, so if you can start with a fresh product, that's going to be best. The at least starting out here, as you get going, use some oil, some fat in the pan, and uh, um, yeah, cook on moderately high, no more than that heat, and depends on the size of the pieces of meat, but the thickness of the cut or the part of the fish you're using. But you don't need much heat. You're looking for across the side of the fish here, the heat penetration. You look at the color change, and as the heat penetration reaches a third of the way or so, flip that over, and then let that cook again about a third of the way. By that time, some of that heat's going to slowly creep toward the center, and then you can turn down the heat or turn off the heat, and let carryover cooking sort of gently and delicately encroach into the center of that cut, and that's going to give you a nice delicately finished fish as well. Okay, so keep those couple of things in mind: fresh fish, and then also find that sweet spot with your butter sauce to maintain the emulsion, all the while keeping in mind that practice in multiple rounds is going to be desirable. But again, go back to the Rouxbe course to better understand the methods and techniques that go into these preparations. Thank you. All right. Hello, Diane. Diane says, my question is about timing. Are there methods to timing the cooking of the meal so all ingredients are done about the same time? Thank you. Yes. We can use the practice of par cooking vegetables, for example. I'll take that as an example. Where if you, I'm going to go directly to one of our assignments, and that is if you have broccoli, and let's say it takes you um, uh, 6 minutes to cook the broccoli. It depends on the size, right? You can par cook or partially cook that product through steaming or simmering ahead of time. You can shock it, which means to chill it in ice water, and then hold it until you get closer to service time, or you can add that back to the pan. You can finish it by sauteing. You can finish it by immersion method through simmering again, for example, through steaming again. But at that point, the cooking time is going to be much shorter. You should be able to really finish the cooking within a couple of minutes. So you're going to cut down on the cooking time considerably, so you can start to align it with the other food items that are all coming together to be done at the same time. So that's one method that we use, okay, is to par cook or partially cooked certain foods. Other items can be entirely cooked ahead of time. And then all you need to do is to reheat it and then hold it at that temperature. So all you do is pull it out of the oven or pull it off the stovetop and then serve it. They can be in a oven to table container, or if you have it in a service bowl, for ready for the table, you can put some foil over that and then just hold it in an oven at the lowest temperature. For as long, for an hour or something like that until service time. And, if your oven low temperature is still kind of high, let's say, 170 degrees Fahrenheit, like my oven at home, consider heating up the oven, then turning it off, and then placing food items in there to hold, so that as the temperature falls, it's going to be much cooler. Okay. So those are a couple things that you can do. And then the third thing is practice. Cooking, like any other activity, really, is going to be based upon practice and repetition. And I always think about these analogies in music or sports. If you're trying to get better playing an instrument, you don't just play it once and then expect to be really good at it. You want to do that many, many times. And depending on how good you want to be, you need to adjust your practice accordingly. Same thing with basketball or some other activity. You need to practice those layups or those jump shots until you're really good at it. And cooking is really no different in that respect. Okay, so have patience with yourself and go through this activity of repetition, which is going to get you there. Thank you. And looks like we have another question from Diane, who says, if you're cooking a dish with multiple ingredients like pasta with mixed vegetables, do you cook each vegetable separately and then mix them together to heat through before serving, or something else? Yes, that would be the best way. I rarely use the word best, but yeah, that's going to be a solid approach because you can maintain the best control over each component that goes into that dish. Now, in a restaurant, that's what we do. As part of our mise en place, we have each ingredient or each component already set up, and they can be pre-cooked, partially cooked, or uncooked, depending on what's going to be appropriate. And then they go into the pan when an order comes in for final assembly and finishing. And so what you described is going to be really the best way to maintain control over each of those components and come up with a dish that's going to have all the textures that you might be looking for. Thank you. All right, the next question. Let me take a quick sip here. Got some mint tea, some green tea with mint, Moroccan style today. All right, on to the next question here. What is the consumer demand for plant-based food market? Are consumers seeking plant-based alternatives to traditional animal products like meat, dairy, and eggs? Okay, great question. This veers a little bit away from the sort of food and cooking in the kitchen sort of question. Gets more into market trends, but based upon what I have seen over the last years and even more recently, is that while some of these meat alternative companies have experienced a dip during the pandemic anyway, the projection is for robust growth over the next several years. And if I recall, sources like Bloomberg and others are projecting significant growth in this space over the next several years, 6 or 8 years or so. And this would be true of these three categories of food that you mentioned: meat, dairy, and eggs. And I'll also add, okay, that this particular market that we're talking about here really focuses on what I think of as highly processed plant-based food products, that will mimic or replace these animal-based products. So very different from the whole food plant-based cooking that is really our preference here at Rouxbe for all of you. Okay, and please think about that as you consider for whatever your context of cooking is. If you're thinking about nutrition, think about the whole foods first before we reach toward the highly processed foods. Okay, This is the meat, dairy, and eggs sort of sector. It's interesting as you start to read ingredient labels. You'll see that you're probably not going to make any of these at home. These are really foods that have been designed by a food scientist in a laboratory someplace, and they're designed to not so hang with me here. They're not designed to replace animal products in a sense, but rather to mimic them, if you understand what I'm saying. Okay. So they're for people that don't want to give up animal products in a significant sensory way, but want the benefits of um, avoiding some of these things like cholesterol and other concerns that might be associated with an animal-based diet. So anyway, um, highly processed plant-based foods have their own problems. And so think about whole foods is the takeaway here. Thank you. All right, next question. This is from Jane, who says, I am in close company of a community that is convinced that ghee has health benefits. Having just watched Conspiracy, I am concerned. As an Ayurveda expert, what is your opinion? I'll start by saying that while I'm not an Ayurveda expert, I do play one on TV. And when I think about ghee, I'll first explain to the general audience that ghee is fundamentally clarified butter. So it's 100% fat, of butter fat, and within the domain of Ayurveda, which is the traditional medical system of India and South Asia broadly. Ghee plays multiple roles in the daily diet, as well as treatment of different conditions, and as a component in treatments. And so, you said you just watched it sounds like a documentary. I'm not familiar with this, so I can't respond to your concern directly, but let me just speak more generally about Ayurveda and ghee. And that is to say that, if you or if one is concerned, doubtful, let's say, about a certain modality or a certain approach to health and wellness, then consider avoiding it. Okay, in whole or in part. Okay, and this would be true of Ayurveda or any other medical system that might pose some questions in your own mind. Now, the other thing I'm going to say is that in order to better understand Ayurveda, I suggest that you do some studies, some reading, and learn a bit more about Ayurveda. It stands separate from the allopathic or Western medical system, in that its a theoretical foundation is very different. Its approach to issues is very different, but it's sound. And we have a couple of past live events that talk about Ayurveda, and you might start there, although they don't go into any depth on ghee in particular. Okay. The other thing that I'll add is that I think it's important for a lot of folks, outside of India, let's say outside of South Asia, in the US, for example, to experience Ayurveda in order to better understand it. And this is interesting. Okay, in that on one hand, Ayurveda certainly has treatments that will address illnesses and heal them. okay, in conjunction with your own immune system. Um, Also, a core component of Ayurvedic principles is one of prevention of the illness. Okay, that's a strong approach as a component of Ayurveda, which means if you're practicing the dinacharya or the daily routines of Ayurveda, and all goes well, you may never have a chance to fix a problem because there's no problem that emerges to fix because of your preventative approach. Okay. And so that too is a difficult sell, so to speak, in the United States, the American culture here, where we are all about seeing an issue and then attacking it. And then once we have conquered that, we understand what victory is. But if there is no enemy, then we're we're left confused and wanting something. So Ayurveda has a very different approach, when it comes to that daily routine and the ideal of prevention. Okay, so please understand that. um, let's see here. Yeah, also, when you get out into consulting with Ayurveda practitioners, please do your due diligence so that you're interacting with folks that have some solid understanding and experience. Okay, because Ayurveda education in this country, generally speaking, is a lot different, or in some fundamental ways, it's just different from what you get in India. In India, you're immersed in this environment and cultural context, which is much more enriching than what I've experienced here. And a lot of folks are just scratching the surface here when they hang out their shingle to provide good for others. And so, please, again, do your due diligence to find a solid practitioner to work with. Okay. By keeping these other things in mind that I just mentioned. Okay. In terms of deepening your understanding of what Ayurveda is, how it works. And then at the end of the day, if it's not what you embrace, then don't create more stress in your life by trying to figure it out. Okay. Um, but understand that it does have a history. It's a legitimate approach to health and wellness in places like India and elsewhere in South Asia, and it works. Okay, but yeah, ghee is part of that as well. Thank you. Okay, and then Jane has a follow-up and says, can and how do you properly store uncooked udon noodles from the recipe in Rouxbe? So for any fresh pasta, you can freeze it. Things that can be compromised in texture, when they go through a freeze-thaw cycle, as I mentioned earlier in this program. Generally, the higher the moisture content, the more disruption you have in the texture. Noodles, they're without adding some stabilizers to them, like you typically find in store-bought products. The results probably require some practice, but otherwise, wrap them in an airtight sort of fashion, whether it's plastic wrap or in a container with a tight-fitting lid. Store them in the refrigerator. And I recommend using fresh pasta probably within just a couple of days. Often what happens is these dark spots start to form on the noodles, and it's not mold. They're certainly edible, but they don't look as good. So try to use these sort of fresh leftovers pretty quickly. But that's going to be my quick approach. That's certainly what I do. Try to put them in the fridge, airtight, use it within 1 or 2 days. All right, thank you. Hello, Mitch. So nice to see you. Uh, Mitch says, I'm working on the chocolate ganache in a pro plant course. It calls for 3/4 cup of coconut butter. Is there a substitute? Aha. We can find a substitute. Let's talk about coconut butter and the advantage there just very quickly. Um, Coconut butter, it'll start to set up pretty hard, at room temperature, and if it gets any chill at all in the air, it's going to be pretty hard, and that's what gives a lot of the structure, okay, to the chocolate ganache. Um, so if we remove the cocoa butter, ideally we would find something that also sets up hard at room temperature. Okay. And we've had students that would try to just replace that with a nut puree or a date paste. And while those things certainly taste good, um, they are still a little bit lacking in the structure element. But you can give that a try and see if it might fit, uh, your particular application. Um, Now, another thought is that if you were to melt some chocolate, the higher the cocoa content, well, yeah, the higher the cocoa butter content, the better. But basically, if you melt some chocolate and then incorporate that into that filling or that base, that right will set up hard when it's chilled. And for example, we've got other um, sort of pie and chocolate mousse sort of recipes that call for a combination of tofu and melted chocolate. And the chocolate, when it sets up, it gives it a lot of structure. And so that's perhaps something to keep in mind. In fact, just a couple of days ago, Chef Shar shared with me a chocolate cheesecake recipe that came from via Instagram, and it's baked, give it this look of a baked cheesecake, but it had tofu and then it had melted chocolate in it, and it's set up beautifully. Very very stiff and rich and smooth, and so you can certainly then adjust, right, the quantity of chocolate if you want something that's going to be, harder or a little bit softer, once it's chilled. So you have some control through experimentation as well. But do give that a try, and again, see if there might be a solution in there that fits, the way that you're going to serve it, as well as your preference for the viscosity or the stiffness, okay, of that filling. Okay, and so I'll give you an example. If you're going to serve this in a crust, like in a pie form or a torte sort of a form, and you're going to cut out wedges and serve them, you want that filling to set up enough that it's not going to ooze onto the plate shortly after you slice it. You want that appearance to stand up, so that the guests can enjoy that presentation as well. But on the other hand, if you're going to serve it, as a mousse, that's maybe in a wine glass or in a ramekin, then the structure is less important. You just want to maintain some mouthfeel that's going to be satisfactory to you and your guests. All right, thank you. All right, next up, let's see. Maria writes, for allergies, what can I substitute? Nuts, dates, probably chia seeds and nutritional yeast. Let's see here. So let me just kind of shoot from the hip here. For nuts, think about seeds like sesame seeds. That can be a nice substitute. For dates, think about other dried fruit. There's a whole world out there, whether they're blueberries or cherries or raisins or something else. Chia seeds. I guess it depends on what we're doing here, but think about psyllium husk, or it could be flax seeds. There's a couple of things that come to mind that have a similar gelling property to them. For nutritional yeast, it kind of depends on what you're making with this. You could try one of these liquid aminos for some umami. Soy sauce, could be miso paste. Again, it just kind of depends on what it is that we're applying this to. But those are some quick thoughts that come to mind for your consideration. Thank you. And Mitch has a follow-up. What is your opinion on coconut oil and butter in the diet? Uh, I'm gonna defer to Dr. Michael Greger and others out there, that have probably a more solid footing on the medical, interpreting the medical research and that sort of thing. Um, but I mean, otherwise, I mean, my general approach is moderation to everything, and probably if there's one thing that I eat every day, it's beans. But I try to swap up the beans. I'm not eating just one variety. But when it comes to something in my diet, it's really about moderation. But again, in terms of what some of the research might say, take a look at nutritionfacts.org, with Michael Greger, Dr. Michael Greger, and others, right, in the plant-based space are going to have some more deeply informed opinions on that. But again, for me, my diet, moderation, eating it once in a while hasn't been a concern for me. All right. Thank you. All right. So Elena says, how far into the green part of the leek should I be using for recipes? Use it all. Leeks are good food. And, as you get up into the darker green part above the ground, it gets a little more fibrous, a little bit more chewy, and so you need to maybe cut it smaller so that the fibrous strands are shorter. You need to cook that with some moist heat. Sweating it or steaming it a little bit in the pan to soften it up a little bit longer than the white part down below. Also taste the two to see how flavor intensity or balance is different and similar. And then also think about what color you want in your finished food. If you're making a monochromatic dish where you don't want any darker pigments, then avoid the green parts of the leek. But otherwise, it's all edible. And, I recommend using all of it. This is part of the no waste kitchen philosophy, okay? And even down to the roots of so many of these foods. They're edible. And it's just a matter of handling it or treating it in a certain way by cutting it, to a smaller size or cooking it a little bit longer, or even seasoning it or flavoring it in a certain way so that we enjoy it. Okay. But don't shy away from both the white and the green parts of your leeks. And then all of a sudden, we are at the last question of the day here. And this is from Rosie, who says, hello. And she says, I'm just starting regarding aquafaba storage. I've been freezing in ice cubes in looks like 1 tablespoon units. This is from the canned beans. Is that okay? Yes, that in my experience has been okay. And give it a try. And as I mentioned at the front end of today's program, if necessary, you can always adjust the viscosity or the concentration of aquafaba by some gentle simmering. Okay, so give that a try and see how that goes for you. All right, and so that wraps it up for today. I want to thank all of you for joining me during my office hours, and look forward to seeing you all again. And until we meet, happy cooking.